Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, World Alternative Media here, and we are joined once again by the one and only G. Edward Griffin, and we have a lot to talk about today, including the Red Pill Expo 2019, which you can find a link for below the video, June 7th to 9th in Hartford, Connecticut. I can't wait. So many incredible speakers like Cynthia McKinney and Jeff Berwick and Del Bigtree, of course, Mr. Griffin and Robert Kiyosaki, and we'll get into all of that soon because it is something I really want to talk about. I'm really excited, and it is coming up very soon, so make sure to check that link below. But first, I wanted to talk about something that has been making a lot of headlines. Most people have noticed it. Even the most mainstream academic economists are starting to say, hey, something is not quite right, and we may be walking right into a recession, we might be walking right into a crash, and it's eventually going to happen. And these, I mean, except for Paul Krugman, but mostly, most of the academics are saying something's about to happen, and because they're forced to. It's clear, it's right on the horizon, it's always inevitable. All fiat currencies eventually revert to their true value of zero, and they always have. But again, we cannot put a date on it, but we know that something is clearly on the horizon here. And Mr. Griffin, I wanted to ask you a little bit about what your thoughts are on the aftermath of a financial crisis, because we know this is going to happen eventually. You've written a whole book about the inevitable, which is The Creature from Jekyll Island, many years ago, and so much of what you've said has come true, and it's on the brink of coming true. So I wanted to ask you about what you think about the aftermath of a financial crisis, your thoughts on how one can overcome it, and what you think, looking back at history and indicators you've seen throughout history, what you think will happen following the inevitable dollar crash. Is it going to be a hyperinflationary event? Will it just end and we'll go into another currency? A domino effect? What do you think?
Well, Josh, that is a great question. You know, most people are interested in the question of when is it going to happen, or how bad is it going to be? How can you protect yourself, and things like that, which are, of course, legitimate questions. But when you ask, what about the aftermath? That requires a deeper analysis, because there's some other factors that have to be considered. The other factors are, what does the system look like, the economic and the political system look like at that point? And the reason that's important is because we've had depressions and crashes before in history. Not only us, but other nations, other cultures even in history have had their counterparts of that sort of thing. But in up until this point in history, there's always been what we like to call the free market. In other words, the governments of the world, although they might have been militarily powerful and could control what you do and where you go and all of that kind of thing, may extract taxes from you, maybe pull inflation out of you through fiat money and all of that thing. Still, the economies were relatively free for people to adapt. And when there is the freedom to choose, and by that I mean even freedom to choose a currency. Previously, when other systems have gone down, the victims, meaning the citizens of that country or that area, have rushed out to acquire other currencies from other countries and so forth. So they had the freedom to choose another currency, which to some extent pulled their chestnuts out of the fire. If they could convert their failing currency into other currencies, then they could manage saving some of their wealth. And even today, we see people running away from the dollar, or running away from the yen, or running away from the Deutschmark, or whatever it is, if they feel that those currencies are failing faster than the other currencies, which is really what you have. People say, well, the US dollar is up today. Well, it wasn't really up. It just means that it didn't fall as far as the others in the world. But anyway, all that aside, I can't help but comment on these little ticks as we go along. But so today it's a little different, because for the first time in history, the powers that be are talking about a global currency and a global economic system. And if they succeed in doing that, and they're trying very hard right now, there'll be no place else to go. There will be no other currency to go to. And even if they create their own new currency and say, well, you've got to use this one, the point is there will be a monopoly character to it. You will have to use it. You have no choice. And under those conditions, it's hard to predict what will happen. But I'm going to try. I think that what we have to do, first of all, is prevent this scenario from happening. We have to make sure that the free market, the semblance of it that exists today, is amplified, and we return to that so that we can recover by having choices. Wherever people are free and they have choices, they can rebuild. It's amazing when you see how fast Europe rebuilt after the devastation of World War II and all of that. But they had a free system to do that in. Okay, now back to your question. If the powers that be are successful in establishing a one world currency and a one world banking system through the International Monetary Fund, which is that's what their goal really is. And regardless of whether it is a currency as we know it, or even if it's a cryptocurrency, as long as it is a controlled currency, and I don't want to hear the argument, oh, you can't control cryptocurrency, because that's been completely debunked. Of course you can. It takes a little technology, but you can. But if it's a one world currency, then there's no freedom of choice, and there'll be very little opportunity to escape the devastating effect of all of this, except through what they like to call the black market. In other words, people will always make personal exchanges. And that is a very grim picture. You ask me, what do I think is coming? Well, I think unless we change the current path, unless we change the current trend, and unless we raise the level of understanding of the average person as to what's going on and what the options really are and who the good guys are and the bad guys. There aren't many good guys out there telling us what to do. Unless we change that, that's exactly where we're going. And we'll have a very grim future indeed. And we cannot look to history to see an easier way out.
Yes, and you mentioned the black market, and it's interesting looking at the black market, how many factors play into what a free market really is. Unfortunately, plagued by violence and a lot of cartel activity due to government restriction of certain markets. One can easily look at something like cannabis, for example, in the black market that was involved in the war on drugs, where you saw cannabis stay the same price on the black market for 30 years, and then the government comes in and it triples in price suddenly. And I think this is a great example of how government restrictions play into that. I just came back from Africa. I was in a third world country, and I noticed something that was quite interesting regarding what you were kind of talking about there, which is the sustainability of people in these countries, regardless of how impoverished they are. You go to a lot of these places and there's no taxes. I mean, people on the street will exchange goods for services on the spot, and there's no accountant over there deciding how much money you spent. And you notice that people are incredibly sustainable. They all build their own houses, they live off the land, they do all this kind of stuff, and we're all told to be scared to go to a lot of these places. Whereas you look in the United States, Canada, Britain, and a lot of the first world nations around the world, and people are getting more and more dependent, less and less sustainable, less and less responsible. And it seems almost like by the script, it's like we've been told and we've been pushed in the direction of unsustainability and weakness and stupidity and dependency. And I feel like this is really prime for a situation like a monetary crisis, where we have a collapse and then people, millennials, young people, don't know how to open up a can with a can opener. I mean, we have gotten to this point where so many people have become so dependent, and I wonder what your thoughts are regarding the dependence of the masses going into something like this, some kind of crisis like this, whereas we see a lot of these third world countries, despite being third world, are incredibly sustainable because I guess they don't have a choice.
Well, Josh, I think you pretty well said it. All I could say is that old comedy line, where the guy turns and he says, "Yeah, what he said," because you said it very well. And the only comment I would add to that is that this is a telltale mark of a collectivist society. We've talked before about individualism versus collectivism, which is the primary ideological battle that's really going on in the world today. And the collectivist mentality is that the collective or the group is all that's important. The individual must serve the group and all that sort of thing. And this is an outcome of that, because under collectivism, people are ingrained with the idea that they are not personally responsible for anything. It's a collective responsibility. Society will take care of it. You know, under a system based on individualism, you have private property. You say, well, that's my property. I have to take care of it. It's my responsibility. And so you work hard to sustain your own property. But in a collectivist system, you're not allowed to own anything. You're living in the commons, and isn't that wonderful? Everybody's equal. The only trouble is nobody takes care of what they're living in. Their houses deteriorate. They won't even pick up dirt off the sidewalk because, oh, well, it's not my responsibility. Where's the guy that's hired as a street sweeper? Why isn't he doing his job? You know, this kind of thing. So what you're talking about is at a very deep level where even in these third world countries, they still have strong elements of individualism present. And in the kind of cataclysm that we're talking about, economic cataclysm, I think those people are going to do much better than those of us that live in these high-rise zones and we're packed and stacked in the cities. And if the water doesn't come out of the pipe, we die of water deprivation. You know, all of these things that we could go into. It's a dystopian future indeed, and it's not just science fiction. I think this is very much a real possibility.
I think at this point we've gotten past most science fiction of the 1940s in literature and the 1970s and 80s in film. And I do have to mention, I mean, like, it'll take a few days after a major crisis for grocery stores to run out of food. And then what do people do? Everyone's dependent on someone else to get them their food. People don't grow their own food, and governments have been very they've enforced their laws on a lot of places throughout the United States as well as other countries, stopping people from collecting rainwater, growing food on their own lawns, etc. And we've gone to this point where we believe that the only kind of lawn is a green lawn, grass on the lawn or stones on our lawn, and we've kind of lost this idea of sustainability. And in the subject of collectivism, I really highly suggest everyone check out the film Dr. Zhivago from the 1960s, which for a Hollywood film did an excellent job of showing the horrors of collectivism, and it was a great book as well, and talking about, you know, how the personal life is destroyed and you all serve the state, you all serve this collective. No one has a personal life anymore. They all have to serve this almighty power, and everyone starves and dies. And it's a terrible, terrible thing that we've seen repeat so many times throughout history, and it's just like we never learn. But people like free things, and they're ignorant to what those free things entail. But anyway, I wanted to move on to another subject. For anything else on the financial crisis and what comes after, I highly suggest everyone, again, check the link to the Red Pill Expo below. There will be a lot of this spoken of at the Red Pill Expo in Hartford, Connecticut. So please do not forget to check that link out. It's coming up very soon, and I'm really looking forward to it. And we will get further into that later on in the video. But I wanted to talk about this strange situation in recent years regarding whistleblowers and this notion that, you know, you have the whole Trump administration and you have all these media people and CNN saying that he's attacking the press, yet at the same time CNN will attack Julian Assange, who is literally putting out information that helps people understand what the government's doing, criminal activities by the government, regardless of left or right, Republican or Democrat. People like Chelsea Manning, formerly Bradley Manning, who released these videos that showed the United States government killing innocent people, and instead of punishing the people who killed innocent people, they punished him, or now her, threw her in prison for years, and now, because she will not comply with an investigation and rat out other people involved in this WikiLeaks situation where Julian Assange has recently been arrested, she keeps being thrown in jail and then released and then thrown back in jail. And it's just this, it's torture for anyone to have to go through such a thing. And I have to talk, or I have to ask a little bit about this, Ed, what your thoughts are on this notion of whistleblowing is bad, exposing criminal activity is bad, but being part of that criminal activity is all fine and dandy as long as no one ever knows about it.
That too is a deeper topic than it appears on the surface. I mean, it's easy to say, oh, they shouldn't do that. I mean, isn't that silly? Isn't that ridiculous? Well, look, this is right and that's wrong. But what we're dealing with here is something, I think, at least, is kind of, it's disturbing because it has to do with that thing called patriotism. Mm-hmm. I was raised as a young guy, in a culture where it was good to be patriotic. And most people still feel that way. And I do too. But we need to take a look at this word patriotism. And patriotic to what? To be a patriot means to be a patron, to admire something, to defend something, to identify with something, to be proud of something, to fight and protect something, even die for something because it's so valuable. Mm-hmm. And the word patriotism can be applied to a lot of different things, but generally it's applied to this faithful obedience and love of one's country. That's how it's usually used. And, as kids, we're raised to pledge allegiance to the flag and to honor our soldiers, our veterans, especially those who've given their lives for us and for our freedoms and our liberties and all of this scenario. And it's all good and it's all true. But now, is there another level to that? And there is. The other level is that all of the demagogic nations or conquesting nations, all of the militarily aggressive nations of the world use patriotism too. Nazi Germany had millions of people who were patriotic to their country because they were at war and they thought that they were on the side of right. And so they were patriotic to Nazi Germany. The citizens of Japan were patriotic to Japan when they attacked Pearl Harbor. And they thought that was a good thing because they were patriotic to their nation and to their countrymen. And, I need not go further. You get the picture that all countries instill their citizens with patriotism because that is the condition of mind that is required for citizens to support their nation, their politicians, let's put it more succinctly, without criticism. And this was discussed in the writers of the past. I mean, I can't think of his name right now that wrote The Prince, the book. I'll come back to it in a minute. Anyway,
we'll bring it up on the screen.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you. Machiavelli. Thank you. Machiavelli finally came. Machiavelli wrote about that in Advice to the Prince. If you want the people to support you and follow you, no matter how bad the situation is, no matter how much you plunder them, no matter how much you take their liberties, go have a war. Start a war, get involved in a war, or have fear of a war. Talk constantly about the enemy and create a feeling of patriotism. And so there's a whole 10-day seminar that could be given on this topic. The fact is, like so many things, like religion and so many things, there's a good side, a very good side, and a potentially very bad side too, because people have fought wars in the name of religion. They've killed people in the name of religion. And yet religion is a powerfully positive force. It depends on so many other factors, like who is running the show, the powers that be, as we talked before.
And I don't think that there is any greater or more violent religion throughout history than government itself, which has used religion in so many cases over the centuries, whether it's the ancient Romans or you have it, so many different governments over time have used religion, sometimes atheism in the case of the USSR, in order to get the masses on their knees and begging the government out of complete dependency to provide for them as a government plunders them under boot.
Absolutely true. And so now we come back to this question that seems so simple on the surface, but what we find now, especially in the United States, let's limit it to that, is that the federal government has become infested with some very bad people. Sometimes we call it the swamp, and I think it's a good name for it. These swamp creatures are not the kind of people we want representing us in our government. They're the predator class, many of them. And so they're corrupt and they're dictatorial, they're tyrants, they're liars, they're cheaters, they're killers, they're murderers, and yet they're our leaders. And so what do we do with that? Well, these people know that the best way for us, best way for them, I should say, to silence our opposition to exposing their crimes is to play the patriot card. And so we have always this phrase, national security. Well, we can't answer that question because it would endanger national security. And if you If you don't think that's important, then you are not a patriot. You're not patriotic. And we even have the Patriot laws, the Patriot Act passed, which lists time after time all the things that you cannot do, limitations on your freedom in order to be patriotic. And so we come to Julius Assange and others, and they're trying to blow the whistle on criminality inside our system. And we should be thankful for that, because it's our system. We don't want corruption in our system. If you love your country, you have got to blow the whistle on corruption at the highest levels. That's the measure of your patriotism. If you want to really show your love for your country, is don't let it be corrupted. And you can't do that unless you blow the whistle. And so that's where I stand on that one.
But instead, people like Julian Assange are thrown in a cage to rot. And it's very unfortunate that so many view his actions as dangerous and irresponsible and treasonous and
unpatriotic.
Yeah, unpatriotic. And with that in mind, Ed, I wanted to get into this a little bit, because under the guise of patriotism, we have seen so many people fooled into becoming pawns to be sacrificed for the king and the queen, which has happened throughout the ages. And this kind of goes into my next point, which is let's talk about the attempt to go to war with Iran, or basically everyone in the world. But right now, the subject matter is Iran. Both of us know this is nothing new. We can go back to the coup of 1953 and the constant acts of aggression and meddling by the United States in Iran's affairs. The U.S. even armed the Iraqi Ba'athist Party against Iran, which they later used as an excuse to go to war with Iraq. What do you think the intentions are for someone like Trump to push the United States, like every past president, closer to war with Iran? Because you cannot turn on a mainstream news channel right now without seeing something fear-mongering, whether it's Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or CNBC or any mainstream media in other countries, BBC, CBC in Canada. You cannot turn on the mainstream news without seeing some form of fear-mongering about Iran, which has hardly attacked a single other country in their entire existence.
Yes. You've got some good questions there. I think your trip to Africa sort of sharpened your mind there, Josh.
It needs sharpening.
No, I don't think so. But there are two. I see quick analysis. There are two elements to your question. One is the Trump issue, which I think I'll just sidestep for the moment, because I think well, I can just comment to say that I think Trump's position is terribly wrong on this issue. So I'll just leave it at that as to why. We might come back to it later. But the deeper issue again is why is the United States so aggressive with these wars everywhere in the world, but especially in the Middle East? Why? Is it really to defend our liberties? Is it really to protect the American people? Maybe at some high level they could rationalize it. But did you really feel that in your gut that Iran is a threat to the United States? And if we keep poking it with a stick, maybe it will, just like a dog. You keep poking a dog with a stick, it might attack you. But other than that, we've never had any problems with most countries until we start poking them with a stick, dropping bombs on their cities and killing their civilians. Then we have a problem. So why are we doing this? And I think that, there are a couple of reasons. One, in the Middle East, of course, we have this thing called oil. And he who dominates the access to the oil dominates the world. We still are running on oil, and we probably will for quite a while. So there's the economic interest that doesn't usually show up in the news stories. We must have governments in the Middle East that control these oils be friendly to us. Otherwise, it may hurt the profit pictures of the large U.S.-based oil companies. Or it could even be argued that it would weaken our national security. We're back to that argument again, but I don't think that's a legitimate argument, because we've never had that threat for national security from those countries. And as long as we mind our business and keep our powder dry and keep our own military clean and powerful and strong for self-defense, not aggression, but self-defense, I don't think we have to worry about Iran or Iraq or any country in the world. In fact, well, that's another story in itself.
Well, we can't forget, before you go further, Ed, we can't forget that a private militia overthrew the greatest world order in history, the British World Order, which founded the United States in the first place, which too many people tend to forget about.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So anyway, there is that issue, which is the the economic issue, oil, and I think everybody understands that. But then there's the other issue, which is the people at the highest levels of all governments of the world today, especially the first world countries. And in the lead of that is the United States. These leaders all are globalists. And I say all, at any high significant level. I don't care that they may speak against it, they may talk against it, but you watch what they do. Words are stronger actions are stronger than words, I should say. Mm-hmm. And you just forget what they say and look what they do. And you can tell that they are globalists because everything they do is to build that so-called new world order. That's their name for it, not ours. And I think the expansion of the military in the United States is part of that. And then there's another profit motive, which is think about the military-industrial complex. How much money is being made in war? The building and use and destruction of armaments and that kind of thing. There are a lot of hidden agendas involved here that cause powerful groups to want war. It's profitable to them, either politically or financially. And so that's my short answer as to why we're doing it. It's not to protect the American people, but it's to further agendas of some very powerful groups inside the United States.
And just the idea that people seem to forget of dropping bombs on these cities and the vast, vast, vast majority of the people dying being innocent people. And in these countries, a huge amount of the population is under the age of 16. So we're watching children get killed, and the children that survive and watch their parents get killed grow up and, well, can you guess what happens next? I mean, they end up wanting revenge. And I don't justify anything that they might do when they're older, but would you not want revenge if your parents were blown up from some foreign government? It goes without saying that you certainly would. And because of this craziness and the lack of truth in the media regarding this issue, I'm planning to go to Iran and Iraq to report on this firsthand and hopefully not become collateral damage. Mr. Griffin was saying before the interview that he wanted a life insurance policy on me. But anyway, I wanted to talk about, continue on with this because nearly every presidential candidate, and this says a lot, nearly every presidential candidate for decades that has won claimed to be non-interventionist. Even Bush claimed to be non-interventionist, and we know how that turned out. What does it say when these people fool the populace into voting for them under the guise of coming in peace? It seems like it's pretty popular to be non-interventionist for some reason.
Well, it's very popular because people are sick of war. They fear war legitimately. They don't want war. They know they can't afford it either. So naturally, when a candidate for national position talks about war, he says, I'm against war. We got to put a stop to these wars. Everybody's, there's the man we're waiting for. And then they vote him and vote him into office. And well, what do you know? Nothing changes. It just continues as before. As I said earlier, words are one thing, actions another. Do you know who said that? Vladimir Ilyich Lenin said, words are one thing, actions another. That's one of the few things, by the way, I agree with Lenin on.
I would hope so. Yeah. Unfortunately, those weren't one of his last words. He lasted for a few years and inspired countless people towards collectivism. And those were the actions. People are more easily able or more easily convinced to support the idea of free things. They don't know what free means, obviously, but people are more likely to be convinced that they must support quote unquote free things, the greater good of the greater number, that collectivist mantra, in order to succeed. And it just perpetuates the exact same problems. It's a Hegelian dialectic of problem, reaction, solution, repeat for eternity. You just end up going in circles. While the government and these entities create these problems, maybe the government and these entities can solve these problems. Oh wait, that created a new problem, and on and on and on for eternity. It's been going on since ancient Greece and long before that, folks, and the collective pack mentality has never served us well. But these are more issues, again, that we will be speaking about in depth among many incredible speakers at the Red Pill Expo 2019 in Hartford, Connecticut. Close to Boston, close to New York. On the East Coast gets a Red Pill Expo for once, and I'm looking forward to getting over there, talking with so many amazing people. And there's so many incredible speakers on so many different topics, because the idea is to hit you where you didn't realize there were red pills you had not yet swallowed. Every single one of us takes blue pills. We have red pills in this way or that way, but we've forgotten, to take our red pill in this subject matter or that subject matter. We thought we knew all that we needed to know, and of course that is never the case. We all could stand to learn a lot more. Our brains, the human brain, can only take in so much. But Mr. Griffin, can you talk a bit about Red Pill Expo and what people can expect attending this conference, which, by the way, everyone, is linked below the video, which I hope everyone checks out. But can you go into that a bit?
Well, yeah, a bit. I could talk a long time on that because it's one of my favorite topics. And I'll start from the back end and say that why the Red Pill Expo is because we're really, a lot of us are just tired of talking about the problem. We want to know as much as we can about it, but we also want to do something about it. And we also know that we can't do anything as an individual. We need numbers, right? There are more of us out there than we realize. I mean, a lot of us start off, we think, am I alone? Am I the only person that sees this nonsense? Has the world gone crazy? And the truth of the matter is, it's because we're drawing our impressions from the media, and the media only presents all the chaos and only one side of the issue. So we think that's the world, when in fact it's theater. In reality, there are millions and millions and millions of people out there just like us who are concerned of these issues, maybe a little fuzzy as to the clarity of why and who and what they're doing exactly, but we know that there's something wrong, and we know it's not in our best interest, and we know we've got to do something about it. And so the idea of coming together is a very important step in any action program, just to find out that we're not alone, to meet other people of like mind from all around the world. That's what's going to happen at the Red Pill Expo, to form into a coalition made up of people with a broad range of ideas on other things. I mean, we may look at somebody and say, well, isn't that person a little strange? But by golly, they're looking at us saying, isn't that guy a little strange? Well, because of what he believes.
I say the same thing into the mirror every morning.
And you're right. That's a pretty strange guy in there. And I do the same thing. Yeah. And you've seen it when you travel. Yeah, these are, to us, they're strange people in these different cultures around the world. And yet, underneath it, there's a bond, because we all want to be free. We want the best for our fellow human beings on the planet. We don't want to interfere with their religious beliefs or their customs, or all of the mores of their society, their lifestyle. We may find some of it kind of not attractive, but they're good human beings, and most of them, there are always 10 to 12% that are the criminality element, the bad people. They're the ones that go into government, by the way. But anyway, most people are just like us. And so if we could just see that common denominator and come together on that level and just say, okay, we'll just ignore these other things because that's your shtick and this is my shtick, but we'll leave each other free to pursue our own lives in the way that we feel is the most advantageous for us and our families, our country, and our society. And so that is the kind of a coalition that we have in mind, that I have in mind when we thought of the Red Pill Expo in the very beginning, is to bring people together who never thought that they had anything in common before. But when they get together, oh my gosh, we're brothers and sisters under the skin. On that concept, we can build a coalition that can actually change the world. So then, how do we get people interested in coming to an event? Well, we were looking around and initially, well, how can we present this in an interesting way? And I thought about that sci-fi movie, and back, it was 20 years old now, called The Matrix. And of course, everybody I think knows the story. In The Matrix, the human beings are being subjected and controlled by machines and computers. People are living in vats. They don't know that. Their brains are all wired up. Their bodies are wired up. And they think in their minds that they're leading normal lives, going to work, having a family, taking vacations, but they're just in the vat. And it's all illusion. And some of the humans have broken out of the vat, and they're trying to rescue others, get them out into reality. And so this is the drama of the story, is how do you get people out of the matrix and into reality? And once they come out, they have a choice. They have to either be willing or wanting to face reality, which is sometimes pretty harsh, or do they want to go back into the vat and back into illusion, in which case they can take the blue pill and everything will seem fine, but they'll just be just being exploited by the machine. They're just an energy source. If they take the red pill, well, then something will happen and they'll be able to see life the way it really is. And so I thought, let's try that as the theme for our conference, because it really is a good parallel to the reality in which we live. We do live in illusions. It seems like the most important things in our lives are loaded with illusions. If once you really dig into it, whether it's healthcare or political life or money, or all of these things, you find out that, by golly, what you thought was true is usually just the reverse. And so why don't we try this as a theme? Didn't think it would work. Our first meeting was held in Bozeman, Montana in 2017. Bozeman, of all places. We thought we might get a couple of hundred people there, maybe. And they came. I mean, we had a packed house. It was a huge audience, and it came from many different countries from all around the world. And it was really exhilarating because the speakers, too, were all people who are professionals, or people with great intelligence and experience who in their own lives had taken a red pill and said, okay, oh my gosh, this is the way it really was. I wasted half of my life pursuing an illusion. And so they're there to talk about what they discovered, the red pills that they have taken. And then people who come from all around the world, they have their red pills too. And it's amazing. You get people like that talking together and you find out, oh, my golly, I didn't know that. And I didn't know that either. And then you start to think, what else don't I know? Mm-hmm. And it's quite an unusual environment. And that's really what it is. And so this is the third one coming up in June of 2019 in Hartford, Connecticut. And I know we're running out of time, or at least I suspect we are. And so I won't bother going into the long list of really great speakers there. You mentioned a couple at the beginning of the show, Robert Kiyosaki and Dr. Zach Bush, and you're going to be there. I'm going to be speaking, and we got a fellow that is a forensic accountant. Now that should put some chills on your spine. You don't want those looking at your books, because a forensic accountant is the guy that looks to discover crime in the books, accounting crimes. And he looked at the Federal Reserve, and we were friends, by the way, before this, and we agreed that the Federal Reserve was really bad. And he called me one day. He said, Ed, you know about the Federal Reserve? We thought it was bad. Wait till I tell you this. It's even worse than we thought. And he discovered something that was very interesting about how the Federal Reserve keeps its books. And he's going to be speaking. That just popped into mind. And I think this is going to be a big red pill, too. So anyway, that's what it's all about. And I hope people can come. And I'll say one last thing. I know that many people cannot come to Connecticut. It's a 3 or 4 day journey, or 3 days of event, and probably another day of travel. And it costs some money. And so I know that a lot of people just can't come. And for those, I just want to tell you that we are professionally recording the event. And it'll be possible for you to watch the whole thing online, and right in the comfort of your own home. Now, we think you should be there if you can, because that's where the experience is. That's where the takeaway is. But if you just want to see this magnificent program, you can also do it online at a cost that's so low, it's absurd. So come onto the website and you'll see all of that data there.
Sure. And I think one of the greatest parts of these events isn't just watching all the incredible speakers, but also networking and talking with people in the crowd. You can go up to almost anyone, and everyone has their interests, their passions, and you can have a conversation with complete strangers that are interested in similar things. And you can come out of it educated just by speaking with other people. That's a great way to communicate and learn, is to speak with other people. people, regardless of their standing, regardless of best-selling books or films and so on. Talk to a random person and you learn something. And I think that's a great part of the event, standing out in the hallway, having conversations, and having conversations over lunch with people that came out from wherever in the world to see this event because they have a passion for their own lives, their children's lives, the future of the world in general. And I think that's an important take from this.
Yeah, Josh, I think as you were speaking, I thought of the two most common comments that I've heard from attendees over these last events. One was that how incredibly awakening the presentations were. They really were filled with meat. They were not just blah, 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 but really incredibly informative and life-changing in many cases. And the other one was that most people say they didn't meet anybody there, no matter who it was, that they didn't immediately find a bond with. They just knew that they were on the same wavelength. It was like instant friendship. We've known each other for years, haven't we?
Yeah, we've all had enough of watching mainstream media, or we've all had the family get-togethers as well, where one of the family members is like, oh, there's that crazy person again. And we've all been there, and being able to bond with people that you've never met before is it's a great feeling. It makes you feel less alone. And the fact of the matter is we aren't alone. There's millions of us out there. We just got to find them and have those conversations. But again, Mr. Griffin will be speaking there, Robert Kiyosaki, Zach Bush, Del Bigtree, Richard Grove, Deborah Stevenson, Cal Washington. I can go on and on. Richard Gage, Cynthia McKinney, Benny Wills is an MC, and we all love Benny Wills here at WHAM. And there's so many people that it would be impossible to go into. So I urge everyone to check the link below the video in the description and the comments as well. Go to that link, redpillexpo.org, and check out all the incredible speakers that will be doing speeches there, and get your tickets. We are just over 2 weeks away from the event,